The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents Healing the Moorish Nation. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam, salam, walaikum, assalamu alaikum. One of the things that we want to talk about is the constant need of making repairs to our homes, our house, our estate, our nation. And as we've talked over the years, we recognize that many of our people are not aware of the meaning of estate, the meaning of heritability. And please write these things down. For many of you, this is redundant. However, because of the times and because of the counter activities that have been taking place, particularly of late, from the hybrid Europeans who've been occupying North America and many of the Asiatic African countries of the world, under their dictums and their dogma and their bulla systems of both the doctrine of discovery, unum sanctum, etc., which most of you are familiar with. And I think a lot of times when we get involved in the tasks and the toils of everyday life, we get distracted by things that may appear interesting. And of course, there are many things that are of interest and absolutely related to our social, economic, and political condition. However, you have the appearance that many people keep forgetting that we've been invaded, that we are under occupation, and that the people who have been governing us are absolute and positively personators, imposters, misprision operatives, etc., and are indeed not the Aboriginal people of the land. And because they have controlled the narrative, the educational system, which many of you are familiar with, the philosophy page of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in their animal husbandry training, adopted from Sigmund Freud, etc., he was used as a pattern by them for doing mind control, etc. As Sigmund Freud studied Asiatic African culture, and of course the ancient and established knowledge of both sound and light and the operations of the brain of humanity, which is ancient technology. And of course, they've been using that knowledge against the actual direct descendants of the ancient Asiatic African peoples, etc., are commonly known as Kemites, Ham, etc., Canaan, Moabite, etc. And in your collective world of your contemporary operations on the planet Midgard, on this firmament, known collectively as Moors. I want to remind you, because I think a lot of times, because of the pressures and the cruel, unfair, and debilitating and toxic methods and activities that are induced upon the people of the land, socially, politically, economically, etc., that many of our people, and particularly the younger generations, by having limited reference points, forget that we are under occupation for quite a few generations and start falling into the mind control systems of the animal husbandry systems adopted from Sigmund Freud. And so it's important for us, and particularly those who recognize and know this, to never forget it and to keep in mind that we can't recreate the nation. The nation already exists. The nation has been damaged. No different than an issue of a storm coming through and damaging your house and your estate and the land. You can't remake the land. You have to use what the land gives you to make repairs. And you also have to keep in mind your knowledge in harmony with nature of the materials available to you and the elements available to you to make such repairs. Of course, that now you're dealing in the aggregate physical when we're talking about the physical houses, the physical estates, etc. But as most of you know, that estate is not limited to your physical buildings, etc. It also deals with your hereditaments, your liberties, etc. And as a reminder for many of you, because as you know, as we've talked over the years, a lot of the subject matters that we may redundantly repeat has more to do and is more directed to those who are awakening, distinguished from, but not limited to, those who have been erudite in both the political, civil realm and in positive law jurisprudence, and of course with the operations, knowingly, of the Circle Church and Chancery members of the Roman Curia who have been perpetrating frauds under the guise of judicial and extrajudicial activities. And they have done so quite successfully. Also, with the including and with consideration of the fact that many of the people, the natural people among our own, who over the generations have taken positions of leadership and positions of authority, though limited because of the occupational powers, etc. Very often these beings actually fail to tell the people the true history of them being the true Americans, distinguished from those who have been governing our people under de facto operations. And this is why, again, over the years, we've reminded the people to not forget the distinction between de jure and de facto operations, etc. Um, and so again, and this is more directed to many people around the land who are becoming cognate of logically of the loss of their birthright because our people are being abused on many fronts. And of course, the human trafficking aspect of the Spanish Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere has reared its head, and the people are more aware, although many are still in denial, of the human trafficking aspect of the United States Corporation Company, which most of you know by now is a private foreign human trafficking for profit corporate entity conglomeration of Roman Curia member corporations, etc., uh, regulated under or what you call guided by field operatives known as the attorneys, esquires, lawyers, etc., members of the British accredited registry, registered, of course, as you all know, um, and operative main headquarters at Fleet Street, England. And those bodies, politics and governing bodies, um, govern and control all of the pseudo court systems that have been operating at North America actually since the early 1800s. Now that is the truth. And you must keep in mind, and you must remember that there have been no lawful operative courts. Article 3 for ambassadors, diplomats, and consulars in relationship to treaty obligations and enforcement, and constitutional obligations in relationship to those treaties and the enforcement, and all obligations in force related to them all have been pretty much artificially neutralized, although they are lawfully still in force. And of course, many of you already the distinction between lawful and legal. And while we won't go into that because we really want to get into the heart of some of these matters to encourage many of you to stay strong under the pressures that are being brought to bear on the people, because the fact, as we've been saying to you, particularly we've been reinforcing it for the last few years, for people to recognize that all masks are off. And when we have said that, in these last couple of years, we are acknowledging the evolutionary, the divine evolutionary nature of us coming under a new, or what you'll call a brighter energy of the Aquarian constellation. And of course, that energy disallows much of the corruption of the priesthood that was constructed under the Piscean energy constellation that we are leaving. And that's aside from the fact many of you all know that this firmament has passed through the Futon belt, and you have a different energy also from the sun relative to our position in relationship to the sun. And this has much to do why the dark priesthood has put so much focus on having people argue among each other on a point of distraction as to whether the firmament is flat or round, etc., to divert you from paying attention to the fact of the matter is that they're wrongfully and corruptedly governing you and misgoverning you on your land, with the also intent of extinguishing you under genocide and then claiming your estate. I want to remind you, I want to go to the law book and read estate for those of you who, because we're so busy sometimes fighting back in our different methods and ways to counter the corrupt operations that is almost absolutely apparent. As a matter of fact, the hybrid Europeans are so contemptuous, and they're also so upset that people are waking up, that they're not even doing what you call, although they've always maintained it, they're not doing so much as you would call their covert programming they're actually being more open with their abuses of the people. And even at this point of the game, they're even sacrificing many of their own in order to maintain or try to regain a lot of power and influence that they've had over the nation states of the world. And as you all know, one of the policies of the Roman Curia members to the nature of maintaining their power in the conquest of the unum sanctum conquest issues is to approach everything from the perspective of not allowing moral or ethical principles interfere with their pre-prescribed operations. And so I'm going to read. I first want to read a state to you, as we were saying earlier, so that you can keep in mind that our many of our people's concepts about estate is absolutely incorrect. And so I'll give it to you in short. And so keep in mind the ancient and modern jurisprudence that you will find in Bouvier's dictionaries, uh, Henry Campbell Black's dictionaries, etc., are rooted in ancient and modern jurisprudence. So when many people think that many of these established principles are contemporary, the concept would be wrong. And then you must also remember that the jurisprudence principles actually come from the ancient Sabian Moors via many of the Berber Gypsy tribes coming up and out of Africa on both sides of the water, etc. And so these principles are ancient. And so to remind you, because many of our people, because of the Freudian animal husbandry training, have been fooled into thinking that many of the primal positive law jurisprudence principles have their origin with hybrid Europeans, which is absolutely not true. This is again why it is important, as we reminded you over the years, when you're looking at European history, you got to remember we lost Europe in the early to the mid 1800s, and a lot of the historical context that we have adopted in the name of education is actually that animal husbandry training in order to write us out of history and to write the hybrid European into history. And this is where you get even the tradition of the hybrid European referencing the Aboriginal peoples, impoverished communities here as ghetto, which actually comes from the Ibri, which is falsely referred to as Hebrew, Yetta, which was the wealthy areas in Iberia, which is now known as Europe, which is the control or under the estate of the Moors, who have been genocided out. And of course, many of you who know, and many of you who are scholars, can go into a lot of available history and documents, a history like Jose Pimente Bey. You can go into Jolie Rogers, George Massey. What's the Hybrid Brothers book, Ancient and Modern Britons 1 and 2, and of course you already know that the Danes and the Dubs and the Moors and the Picts are all Moors, and this is why when you do any really just basic research into Iberian history, and of course this has much to do as to why when they speak of Europe, they rarely will tie Iberia with it, because they don't want you to think or retie yourself to Moorish history, because that's a deliberate separation, because you're talking about jurisdictional powers and also the true Europeans. Was there a question, Dr.
No, I just wanted to add something to what you just said. When you talked about the ancient Brits and
Ancient and modern
Brits versus the modern Brits, and how you said genocided out. But one of the things they did, they bred out a lot of the melanation and
this is where you're talking about the hybrids,
right? But there was a lot of breeding with with them, and eventually, you know how you bleach out whatever was there. But what I wanted to say as a correlation is that what we're seeing today, with all of the push for the crossbreeding, so to speak, with with the melanated man. With so you've seen the melanated man, but the melanated woman, woman with the hybrid European, you're seeing it more and more. Like they're doing what they did in Australia, deliberately figured out how many generations it would take to bleach out. The Aboriginal.
With the problem that and that's absolutely true. With the problem that they're having is that the Canaanite Moabite gene is so strong that it always dominates. And this is another reason why they've been very adamant on altering and modifying the DNA, which many people need to understand. This is why they have really invented what they call the jab, and also put in it, among other things, fetal tissue, in order to imply that the people are cannibalizing, etc. Also, it changes your DNA, and also for many people, and which we talked about, many of you have experienced, that there's graphene oxide. However, the issue of the estate and the deliberate genocide, is always expressed among all of the politicians, the so-called lawyers, esquires, etc. And I want you all to remember this. Is this level enough to be read?
Yes, you can bring it down just a little, just right there.
All right, you all read this carefully.
Bring it up a little bit.
And write this down.
There you go.
Read this, and this is the Silent Weapons Executive Order 11490. This was done during the Johnson administration. This is right after they assassinated Kennedy. Keep that in mind. Now, this is their policy, and this is for many of the people who keep forgetting that we're under occupation, and also many people who, rather than try to heal the nation, they're getting this scenario of creating a new nation, which cannot be done. The nation must be healed, etc. And I think because of the heavy and tedious work that's involved in the reality of what we're actually dealing with, that many people lack the courage and the perseverance to continue the struggle, because many of them have been spiritually and politically and economically broken. And of course, that's part of the agenda of the Unum Sanctum operations, etc. So for you to keep in mind and not forget, when you're talking to members of the Bar Association, this is what they are reading secretly, along with the politicians and the council people and the mayors and the pseudo governors and the alleged senators and congressmen for the United States Corporation Company, all of who have different positions of what you call administrative clerk powers, etc., assigned for the enforcement of the Unum Sanctum operations. This is their security page that is shared among all politicians, all lawyers, all esquires, all attorneys, but never made public, which is also why our people who don't understand the real operations often get frustrated when they're dealing with these so-called U.S. agencies and keep failing to get, quote unquote, justice. And then you'll see many of our people making statements over the years, no justice, no peace, and things like that, making posters and T-shirts with those statements on it, and they are thinking that they're appealing to these people's morals and ethical side, not comprehending the real politics. So this is their position. Is this clear? And many of you are looking, take a snapshot so that you can pull this up later on your phones or your computers.
There. No.
And then I'll read it. Security. And I'll read the instructions that is given to all the politicians that you have been trusting and voting for. And it says Operations Research Technical Manual, TM-SW7905.1. You can start on page 3 or on page 57. And in one of our recent treatises here, we did go into 57. We're going to go into page 3, security. And keep in mind, all politicians, all lawyers, all attorneys, all bar members, all congressmen, all senators, all governors have this as their political operations. When they're doing any legislation, presenting any bills, this is their ultimate end, irregardless of what appears to you. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society, i.e., the engineering of social automation systems, quote unquote, silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e., slavery and genocide. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without the full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodology for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or groups of persons and the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no apologizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. You have qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity without a loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interest. Do not deviate from them. Welcome aboard, page 4. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, quote unquote, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons, quote unquote. This book contains an introductory description of this war, its strategies, and its weaponry. May 1979, 74-1120. This is their security page, and this is why this is not talked about in public. This is essentially, as it has been for them, what is known as a top secret document. And of course, people get frustrated, like as you see, you'll have people among our own that over the years will have meetings and they will talk about the packing of the POW camps or prison systems with our people predominantly, and talk about the unfairness of it and immediately get misdirected into what we call the fake race paradigm argument and prejudice argument, which was designed to divert the people from the fact that these people that you've been calling government are actually waging war on the people, and their positions have no place for moral or ethical or cultural considerations. However, from a political perspective, one of their main objectives for political operations is a strategy of continuously doing what is known as colored or colorable legislation and legacy operations to convince the people that they're doing something on behalf or for the good of the people under the jurisdiction of the de facto United States government and its subdivisional agencies, all of which, including the legislation, are actually run by Roman Curia members, 99% of whom are members of the British Accredited Registry in violation of both treaties and constitutions. And as many of you know, and particularly many of you who are scholars, etc., are very well aware of the original Article of Amendment 13, often referred to as the 1320, and also with the nobility section, whereas members of the British Accredited Registry were disallowed to hold any office under the jurisdiction of the Republic Order of the States United, commonly referred to as United States, etc. And so all of those things have been breached long time ago. And this is where we have to remind you all every once in a while to keep in mind the British Act or the England Act of England 1871, which you know in your congressional records and in the House journals as the Organic Act of Congress 1871. And with those who have been telling the people, particularly of late, which we've been telling people for years, because they're being forced to admit it, that the United States is a private foreign trafficking corporation. And the problem that you have with the instrumentalities, the bottomry instruments that they have been perpetrating against the world in order to create what they would call a reserve currency operations on fungible bond systems issued mainly from 55 Water Street, etc., are at the heart of their U.S. Treasury bond system that has been the foundation of creating what they know or what you've been hearing as the U.S. reserve currency operations, which is in dire straits right now, because as we have told you in the last 7 or so years, we've reminded you that that there will become a feedback loop, which you're seeing right now, where the rest of the world, due to the fact of the criminality, and it has damaged so many nation states, that they have decided to come together to counter Rome's army, etc., and resist certain trade operations with the U.S. corporation in order to bankrupt some areas of it, which are all controlled actually from the Vatican. So when you're talking about any corporate entity or operations operating in what is known as the Western Hemisphere, which does not necessarily mean what you'll call geographical territory, but is loosely used to refer to, as an example, England, United States, Canada, Australia, etc. All of these are referenced as Western, the Western world. But what that implies is actually Occidental breed or the hybrid breed of Europeans who have been operating the European hegemony operations for these last couple of centuries, which has been come to be known with this cover title referred to as white supremacy, which is a cover for European hegemony operations. And this is again why it's also important for you to not forget that one of the continued operations of the Inquisition execution has always been, and write this down so you don't forget it, to do all of their injuries to other people, doing it in someone else's name, and doing it in someone else's identity. So one of the problems that we have is our people not only having a limited knowledge about and who they themselves are, they also have a limited knowledge of these other people who have been impostoring as themselves and also as government, etc. However, these are social, political, economic realities that, though uncomfortable for many people, must be taken in consideration so that we can be better equipped mentally and spiritually to come together harmonically and to begin to shed the grip, the iron hand grip of Rome on the Canaanite, Moabite peoples, etc., commonly known as Kemites, Hamathites, etc., in order to fix our house. And the other thing that you are to take into consideration, that many people who know this real history um, will deliberately divert from it under the idea that we can do these little clubs and create new nations, etc., when the fact of the matter is you can't. You must fix the nation. The nation already exists. Or you have the problem where so many of our people want to be the chief. And so this is where you see a lot of the operative schisms all across the land, where people take on executive titles, etc., of the ancient world, which in their reality, those titles belong to us. However, the political reality is that until the people are conscious to a certain level, they themselves will not shed Rome, even though they have been traditionally, by customs, told in many formats, whether in Hebrew operations, what you call Hebrew operations, or under so-called Coptic Christian operations, and then Orthodox Christian operations, and then Protestant Christian operations, and then Muslim operations, all saying that to render under Caesar what is Caesar's, and that has become an established and common presentment from a moral political perspective in the civil world for almost all the peoples on the planet, even people who are not necessarily what you would refer to as religious oriented people. These are fundamental principles. However, that has become a common statement, but it is often not examined by the people because they're not aware that the people who have been governing us are essentially Roman Curia members. And then we seek a remedy of the problems that they are creating. We go to them and into their de facto jurisdictions seeking remedy. And this is where, over the years, you have always seen we take the position of notifying them or making claim of right and not appealing to them or applying to them, knowing, because this is the fact, that they will dance you around in circles for years and frustrate you and economically drain your resources and then still not give you remedy, because they're operating from the perspective that most of our people don't know that they are de facto and that they're imposters and they're not the real Saba people, that they are imposters, absolutely. And this is why once in a while when we talk about Septuaginta and the Bible will refer to people John 8:44. And if you don't forget that, you'll know what we're saying. Because you also know that as soon as you start telling the truth, they start sanctioning people because they don't want the people to come out of the false narrative control systems, of the mind control systems that they've adopted under the animal husbandry training, under the guise of education, adopted from the studies of Sigmund Freud. which are adopted into all of your school systems under the Western Hemisphere. And of course, many of our natural peoples of the land attempt to use the adopted education systems of Freud in order to solve problems, and then we keep going or walking back into the hole of false jurisdictions, and then we continuously are experiencing men and women who will arise and want to create a new nation rather than heal the nation that's here, as if they're going to create another territorial jurisdiction of aggregate land and then be left at peace to execute the rightful moral ethical operations of ancient Canaan African people, i.e., sometimes referred to under the cover of the true Jew, etc., of these people of the Western Hemisphere who have been trained under animal husbandry that human beings are crayons, like green people and purple people and light skinned, orange skinned black people, and it doesn't matter what color you are. When you hear that kind of language, you already know that you're dealing with the mind control systems that was adopted under the mentalism operations of human subjugation, coming from the studies of the brain, etc., and human responses under Sigmund Freud, which is where they get the animal husbandry methodologies adopted into the educational systems, particularly of the General Education Board, which we reminded you all continuously over the years to read the philosophy page of the General Education Board 1902. And as you know, and this stuff is redundant, but I think again, and it becomes obvious that because we get so tied up with the miseries and the injuries that are being hoisted upon us, that a lot of times we keep looking for something new when the truth doesn't come in versions. It is what it is. And you need to understand and have a comprehension and an understanding and an overstanding of what the injury is that has happened to us, what got us to where we are today, in order to unravel the yarn of evil that has permeated on the planet, and also have an insight into the operations that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, that many of the people that they've trusted that have been calling themselves government agencies, politicians, preachers, rabbis, imams, preachers, etc., from all of the branches of all your so-called major religions, many of them are in actuality, by choice, devil worshippers and Satanists, and they choose the dark side of doing things, but they gain the people's trust by always hiding behind phrases like Jesus, Muhammad, etc., Confucius, etc. And yet they have been so successful because the people have not suspected that the Satanists were actually dominating all the major world's religions. And this is, again, why when many people begin to do some study, they start condemning religion, not comprehending the fact that the masses haven't been getting religion anyway. They've been getting dogmata. And so religion has been charged with evil with many people when it's not the religion, it's actually those who have taken over and corrupted religion, etc. And this has, again, to do with even the ancient Babylonian symbolisms, etc., that many of them used and put a negative spin on, when actually most of them are actually positive and in harmony with nature. But yet, when our people see many of the symbols, they're given a demonic or negative connotation, and our people shy away from them. Or if they go into it, they are guided by the dark priesthood, going into the negative energy in their operations. Not unlike when they do sacrificing of little people, that they even use it in the situations that they're putting in people's arms, etc. That's part of their Satanist rituals, etc., to contaminate people. So I'm going to go also in, as we talked about earlier, into estate, so that you can keep in mind what most of you already know. But again, this is a reminder. Much of this information are for people who are awakening to the corruption, because the injuries that are being hoisted upon humanity are more and more open and more blatant. And so many of the people their ears are more open now because they're receiving extreme pain on many levels. They're losing their children to these Satanist sacrificers, etc. And it's confusing many people because they thought these people were government, i.e., their protectors who they're paying taxes to, etc. And they're finding out, although they're reluctant to accept it, that these people are really exploiting feeders, and they are vampiric in their character, both politically and in their nature of operations with other humans. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Can you take questions before they roll away, and especially if they're in line with? Here, this is a question because you're talking about nations and so forth for healing a nation. I'm just going to put it, Islam. Dr. G, can Taj talk on Empress Ninti of North Carolina on charter also being the true monarch?
See, this is what I'm presenting to you. I try to avoid getting in personal because there's many people that are claiming their right of emperorship and right of sultan and emperor. You got about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different people around the land who claim to be emperor. You've got the same thing with different brothers and sisters. And it doesn't mean that they don't have right of estate. But this is one of the things that I'm presenting, even with this request for healing, is that we should be more concerned with the work that needs to be done, and that the titles, for the most part, are not so much important. It is the work that needs to be done. As an example, and this is not, an issue of ego. Myself, I have actually about 3 absolute titles that I could use or that I would use based on actual structured operations over the years, but I don't use them because I don't take the position that a broken nation, we should act like we're in sovereign control when we're actually not. And the issue is that we need to fix our people because the sovereignty is divine, is not politically given, and is not decided because you, me, or anyone else decides in recognition of the corruption of the history that all of a sudden we are the emperor or the empress or the sultan, etc., or the emir of a territory. And it doesn't mean that some of these titles are not used lawfully and rightfully in what you would call your territorial jurisdictions under your provinces, organized by the people, which you have the right to do. Absolute. However, my concern is that it's more important not so much for the titles to be held by people, but that the people who have this knowledge should be more concerned with healing the people in the nation, because you cannot take a people of a broken nation and actually constructively build or maintain or sustain those things necessary for national institutional operations. And this is one of the reasons why over the years and over the generations, you will see many men and women approach the healing of the nation by being more concerned with taking on titles as if the power is in the title, when in fact the power actually is in the people. And if you don't fix the people, those positions, they are never successful. And I think a lot of times when people get caught up, and I'm not condemning, I'm just being honest about this, in the imagery that's portrayed. And as a matter of fact, over the years, particularly in the most recent years, many of you who know me over the years have seen in these most recent years, I've had less tendency to wear my fezzes or my kufis. And many people have questioned that. And the real deal is I'm in the field. I'm down in the dirt with the people. And I think as for me, it's not for everyone else. None of the garb makes you. Your bloodline and your pedigree makes you. The work makes you. And I think a lot of times when people see you in your Moorish costumes with your pantaloons because I've also had many of you who've known me over years, custom costumes and pantaloons, etc., and boleros, Moorish, that were very, very, very expensive and very well made, etc. But people have a tendency to be distracted by them and also get into this psychology of trying to lift people up or make you this image of royalty, etc. And I'm offended by that, because to me, the royalty are the people themselves, and particularly those who are less conscious of their pedigree and bloodline. And I think anybody that's a soldier in the war for restoring the nation should be more concerned in fixing the house than projecting an image. It doesn't mean that you hold information back, but it's sort of like someone egotistically sitting on the throne, and then you have a bunch of corrupted people that you're calling the nationals or the citizenry, and half of them are still corrupted because their minds have not been cleaned, and they have not done their shadow work because they don't know the real history. And then you have many of them that still keep thinking that these hybrid Europeans who are claiming to be Americans are actually the sovereigns and have the only right to claim to be sovereigns of the land under the title of white people, which is a status, and also sovereign of the land. And they have a tendency to walk back and forth into political jurisdictions that they don't belong in, and they think that the political jurisdictions are distance, when jurisdiction and foreign does not mean distance. And so you have a constant confusion that arises among the people, because you have people moving more in many times in many areas on emotion and not on the knowledge of who they are, and by the spirit of that knowledge, therefore beginning to heal, and then having more capacity to heal others around them. And then we come together as a collective whole by nature, not by some artificial means. Because when people have a knowledge of who they really are and how they got to where they are, you don't need to convince them anymore. Their level of knowledge is no longer predicated in what they believe. It becomes what they know. And a man and a woman who knows themselves is less apt to be enslaved or suppressed than one who just believes or adopts something because they want to be a part of a club or part of an organization in the guise of being a nation, when the nation is out there and it's all of the people of Canaanite, Moabite descent, etc., who have been branded by these tags: Negro, Black, Colored, Indian, etc., and many of whom are not even aware of why we were called Indians or the history of that, etc. While those designations have been applied to the ancient Canaanite Moabites, that is really not the pedigree names of the people, etc. And these subtleties that actually have a great impact on the legal and lawful status of the people is often not taken in consideration or addressed, because they don't want to lose the attention of the people, and they want to keep them in this so-called follower mentality, paying tithing and dues, etc. And on the long run, there's nothing fixed, because the components of the nation are not fixed. So not unlike if you have a storm come along and do damage to your house, you must fix what's broken. You don't necessarily tear your house up and then dig all the land up and throw the land somewhere, because you're not going to remake the plots of land that is your inherited estate. You may rebuild on it, or you may repair that which is on it. Likewise with the component parts of the children or the offspring of the matriarchy, etc., which are commonly called, in their process of coming into being, nativity, nasi, which means to come to life or to come into being, from which you derive the term commonly used at Midgard, referred to as nations and nationality. And this is why it's important for people to also have a more correct meaning of the social political term nationality and nationhood, etc. So when they're talking about nationhood, absent of the pedigree, etc., it creates a false paradigm of hopes, etc., that cannot be sustained unless the people are actually spiritually connected to it. And if the people keep thinking that the hybrid Europeans who have conquered the Western Hemisphere are the Americans, you're not going to do anything with them. What they will be easily subjected to COINTELPRO operation is most of these people who end up be the traitors among us and the operatives of misprision, particularly those who have been heavily influenced by the Freudian mind control systems, etc., known as the General Education Board. They promoted amongst their own children, and particularly, again, those who are members of the Bar Association and those who have been working with them are the major ones who become the infiltrators because they have a level of intelligence already and the people trust them. But usually, most of their activity will be for selfish gain economically with no real cures for the people. And they send the people in circles. And this is according to the general rules of procedures, the civil rules of procedure set up by the circle members, the members of the Circle Church and Chancery, which is guided by those persons, which is why when our people go to the de facto court systems, which are fraudulent jurisdictions, etc., and are in fact not courts at all, that there's no remedy. And of course, these are what you call passageways or portals to their POW camps, i.e., the penal systems for genociding our people and destroying our families. And then, of course, these people who are members or associate members with them secretly, sometimes referred to as boule, among the boule and others, are actually assigned among our people to actually distract us by virtue of saying that they're helping the people or they're teaching law, etc. But you'll see that they'll always make it complex so that you can start paying them off and you're still paying Rome. And the ultimate operations or the outcome is that they're still packing the prisons with our people, still trespassing against our people. And then the operatives among our own are extracting thousands of energy notes from our people in the name of bringing them remedy, which they never do. So this is, again, why it's important for you to have a knowledge or have an idea why I've always taken the position that we have to heal the existing nation. You can't make a broken brick, you understand, be strong in a building unless you're using good mortar to make your repairs. And the mortar for humans in the political realm is nationality.
Thank you. We have another question I think goes right with that because while you're on the subject, this question from Jerome Kane says, did Emperor Khufu show Taj documents of full faith and credit, and will he accept the seat that was offered? And I believe he's talking about your recent appearance on Revision Radio.
This has always been my position. I'm making myself very clear. As for myself, this is not for others because for me, and I think Dr. Naila knows me over the years, I've never been one who's eager to take what you call titles or positions of what you would call, some people call the leader guys. I don't reject that. I think that's the spirit of others. I'm a good fisherman. I will go out and get the people. And for all these people that need these positions and powers, etc., to satisfy whatever spirit of ego they have, you can have the throne. I'm out here doing the work. That's my position. I don't need titles. But I do support anyone that's helping to heal the nation. I'm making that very clear. And keep in mind, faith and credit is a commercial system that's operating for the most part or at Midgard under the commercial operations of the Uniform Commercial Codes. I'm more harmonic with getting back to nature and the true history of the ancient Kemites, Moabites, etc., which is the gold and silver in harmony with the sun, the moon, and the stars, etc., which is the actual monetary system, and the right of heirship to the land, which is the power and the source of the resources. I'm more interested in an approach from that perspective because credit is debt. I'm not interested in indebting our people. I'm interested in restoring their estate because our people should not be in debt to any foreigner. but I understand that how the credit systems operate. I do understand and comprehend that. However, I don't necessarily promote that. I'm going for the whale. I don't want the whiting fish. Though I like whiting fish. I'm for a restoration of the estate so that these issues, my position is this: why put our people in a position to be credited to a foreigner who's been robbing them, who's never honorable, and has no intention of being honorable, on material estates that belongs to them in the first place? And then we're going to have them process or have someone acknowledge full faith and credit, which is a debt system. I don't say that it's not to be used. It's fine in what you call an honorable system. But I just read to you King Alfred. That's their policy. And this is the reason why, like when you see over the years, all of the Asiatic people, whether you're dealing with many of the different tribes of Moors here in the Western Hemisphere, everybody that has made any agreement with them, whether they're building casinos or taking some reservation or taking some other separate piece of implied sovereign operations, they've all been betrayed. And the credit system was actually used to put them in debt on their own land. Without being honest about these dynamics is to be, to me, spiritually corrupt. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't address some of these things in our processes of rising. But I'm very clear to put everything in its place.
Okay, so we have another comment question. We'll bring it. Dr. G, please ask Taj to address the Supreme Grand Council issue that people are saying, falsely, I believe, that he is ignoring.
I'm not ignoring anything among our people. I've been doing this for about 40 years.
Supreme Grand Council issue.
Because the Supreme Grand Council is actually rightfully with Moors coming together, which they should do logically, and all activities basically should be transparent and to the public, with manuals available to the public relative to diversity of their positions under constitutional principles that are established in fatwa, in Muslim law, etc., that are adopted in constitutional principles and treaty operations called consular venues. And what you find is that people, the common people, to whose birthright that we're all addressing, aren't even aware of it because they're not teaching them. The people are more interested in positions and titles and controlling people. And I'm saying people that need that, have fun. It's not what I do. Like I understand fundamental building constructions. You give me time and materials, put me on a piece of land, and I'll build a castle without anyone else's help. All I would need is material, whether it's the electric, whether it's the masonry, whether it's the plumbing, whether it's the furniture, whether it's the roof, whether it's the tile, whether it's the custom shelves, whether it's custom furniture, whether it's sewing, etc. I can do it all, and that's a fact.
And that I can attest to.
So I look at the reality of our relationship with nature, and I measure things by that. I don't measure by people's egos or positions because 90% of the time, let's look at this reality. 90% of the people in almost every position of so-called leadership has more or less, in some ways, a cadre of people around them that admire them or serve them, but the greater broad spectrum of the people of the land, of whose birthright everybody's speaking of, have neither a connection to them and are not aware of them because most of them are secretive with what they do among themselves and use it as a point of power to impress people, and are actually doing very little to none for the community at large. Now, this is not to say that that's not their intention. I'm saying if there's something relative to the right of the people, it is public and it's transparent. And it is available to be known, even if it's not known. It's not something that we need to always have in some private conversation where we're empowering each other to so-called rule the affairs of our people when they don't know the rules of the game. I'm more interested in fishing the people and making them aware of the rules of the game. If they choose to start taking their places among the affairs of men, which we should do and should be about, and logically we have to set up or restore, because not so much setting up, restore councils among our people, etc., which are the nature of our customs and traditions. I'm all for that. However, and it's not a reluctance or it's not a condemnation. I want to see more of the people that know the real history to produce literature and make it well, readily available to all of the people. Whether they accept it or not is not my argument. Made available to them. That whosoever will, let them hear. Whosoever will, let them come. And for those who come with knowledge and with comprehension of what they're dealing with, you can take those people and repair the nation. That has always been my position.
There's a comment shared from Monica Love. We cannot do work, Grand Sheik, without house cleaning.
That's exactly.
We must tighten our circle and out publicly or publicly out the agents that mislead.
You got that absolutely right. 100%, and that's part of the healing, isn't it? And I'm so glad you made that statement because it's so true. And if you look at the history, particularly the contemporary history of many people trying to repair us, and one figure in particularly, our illustrious Prophet Noble Drew Ali, and the foundation that he set for the restoration of our state, and he has had opposition on so many fronts with people around him. However, the principles laid down by him for us and the restoration of our state and our land and our nation, etc., have proven to be absolutely correct and true. And he always reminded us so that we don't get stagnated. He would say that the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you would go back to sleep. He says, study yourselves. And when you had studied well and would ask me what to study next, I would reply, study yourselves. And of course, when you actually do that, you start making discernment. And when people start participating in national reparation willingly on knowledge and not on emotion, not on clubism, not on doing what you call a salami baloney adoration of leader guys sitting on some throne, etc. Not that I'm condemning that, etc. Guess what? You're not going to have anything. You're going to have what we've been having. All these generations passing with these principles having already been laid down and not carried out. And people pretending they got to reinvent the wheel rather than fixing or repairing the house. And I'm telling you, that's the major problem. Be honest about us all. Most of the people that have come and gone have been more preoccupied with their egos and with their images and with raising finance at the expense of the poor, and have done some good, but in fact have done limited reality of really restoring fundamental civic knowledge. And you hear people left and right talking about nation this, nation that, nation of this, nation of that, and then don't teach nationality, which is an absolute contradiction because it's a lot of work, and it indeed is, because we have an injured people. Yes, we do, but you must be real about that. And so my principle is I'm not unlike a carpenter I'm repairing a door right now. Those principles of carpentry apply all over the world. It's not going to be fixed with belief or emotion. It's going to be fixed with knowledge and dedication to the principles and a knowledge of the materials that are used and that are necessary to make such repairs. Doesn't operate on, oh, we need sandwiches. Well, good. If you can't cook, there's tough cookies. Get somebody who can. And all I'm saying is, I'm a fisherman. I'll catch the fish. You all do the cooking. I ain't arguing it. I don't need the titles.
Here we go. Yalla in Ra World, it says the Moorish movement is not a social club. It it is to be taken seriously because being undesirable is not acceptable.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And again, when you start studying during the contemporary history of the people working to restore and to fix some of the injury among our people, that psychology has been allowed to take root without challenge. And so we find ourselves going in circles in many areas because people have adopted the idea that it's a religious belief and not the restoration of a lost estate. And so the way they approach it has been flawed. And then very often people have been taking a position of either or rather than looking that it involves all of it.
So BIHM the third asks, how do you fix the people?
Number one, knowledge would be the first thing I would say. And a research, and I always, as you all know, over the years would give people reference points whenever I present something, or some people like to call it receipts, so that the information becomes their own. Because when people keep or people are given a philosophy or position by different people who are going against the grain and exposing certain information that's otherwise suppressed, they have a tendency to look at that being as the source. When the real deal, when it's looked at that way, they don't recognize that it's actually their birthright information. And this is where you get so many of our people getting caught up in the imagery of people having titles rather than looking at how much of the actual work that is necessary to be put in place to restore those titles by necessity of service to the people is how we should be looking at this. Excuse me.
There's a question for you to define estate.
Estate. Now, this is essentially, and keep this in mind, while I'm going to go into estate and status, I want you all to write down land, as we've talked about before, and do the research on your own so that you can relate to this. So now when you're talking about nation, people, restoring our nation. So when you're talking nation, you're talking about the living divine beings manifest in human flesh. And with that natural being, you would refer to in personam jurisdiction. When you're talking about the subject matter of any operations of structure of institutions that are put in place to structural formulate, to maintain, sustain, and support the structure of nation, now you're talking about subject matter jurisdiction. And when you're talking about the restored land or the aggregate land or motherland, etc., that people fly their vixillum on, and vixillum is known as your flag, etc., sometimes referred to as flying your colors, etc., that's territorial jurisdiction. All of those things must be in place, and all of those things must be taken into consideration, and an honorable approach of the people of recognizing their estate and their bloodline to have a spiritual connection to it, because people won't defend that which they don't feel is theirs, etc. And these things have been removed from our people. So let's talk about estate. Estate is the interest which anyone has in lands or in any other subject of property. So it is essentially an estate is in lands, tenements, and hereditaments. Write down hereditaments. Signifies such interest as the tenant has therein. It is the condition or the circumstances in which the owner stands with regard to his or her property. In this sense, quote unquote, estate is constantly used in conveyances in connection with the words quote unquote right and rights, quote unquote title, quote unquote interests. Keep all this in mind, and is in a general or great degree synonymous with all of them. So estate relates to rights, titles, interests, etc., land, hereditaments, tenements, etc. And so now you're talking about making the distinction, which our people need to be aware of what is known as allodial right of claim, or what is known as aboriginal title, which would be distinguished from mortgages and deeds. They are two different areas. Are we clear? So that's important. And so the degree or the decree of quality, the nature, and the extent of interest which a person has in real property, and comprehend that real property is not what you call real estate. There are two different categories. So in real property is usually referred in to us and as an estate. So when you're making reference to an estate, you're talking about all inheritances. You're talking about all hereditaments, which would include the corporal as well as the incorporeal. Therefore, you're dealing with your traditions and customs that supersede Roman law, that supersede legislated law, but harmonize what is known universally as quote unquote the common law. So the common law comes from the customs and traditions of established right of inheritance and hereditaments, which are related to your estate, and often referred to in Asiatic, African, Berber culture and history as the house of. As an example, if you say, like if I'm referring to the estate of Dr. Naila, in African culture, we would call it the house of Naila. And so when you hear that term or that phrase, the house of, you're talking about the estate of. It encompasses so broad an area that the everyday being is not informed of. This is why you see me take so much these positions over the years that I take, because I know these things must be fixed with our people if you're going to repair them or help repair them. Because remember, they themselves must be willing. Because if the will and intent is not there, you're not doing anything but bringing dirt back into your house that needs to be repaired. And so even like you see when Noble Drawley set up the old Canaanite temple, he said, with these lessons, you can get your house in order. So to get your house in order is to get your nation in order. You look at the constructive carpentry and building principles are actually the same. You're just dealing with what is called the corporal and the incorporeal, and thus you would call it the aggregate and the abstract, or the concrete and the spiritual, or the physical and spiritual. Those principles are synonymous in linguistic form to demonstrate both the aggregate or the physical realm of civil operations, as well as the principled law or positive law and legacy operations that support, i.e., the moral, or what you call moral, ethical, spiritual maintenance of that. And that's where morals and ethics come in. And also usually presented under what you would call religious or operations or philosophical operations. And this is where you have the divine and national movement. It is taking in consideration the natural operations of the divine sovereign right of the human experience. That's fact. And so when you study what Noble Drawley did, all of these things were actually taken in consideration. And so people often call him Professor Drew. And people who haven't necessarily studied his work intently or analyzed it, including remembering where he said the half has not been told, miss it when they get caught up in the emotional approach that many people take in relationship to Noble Drawley and the Moorish Divine and National Movement. So the hereditament principle of the corporal and the incorporeal must always be taken in consideration. All right. Now, in relationship to estate, we continue. In another sense, estate designates the property, real or personal, in which one has a right or interest, the subject matter of ownership, the corpus of property. Thus, we speak of a valuable estate, all my estate, quote unquote, separate estate, quote unquote, trust estate, quote unquote, etc. Now, thus, also, estate in its meaning in the classification of property into real estate and personal, quote unquote, estate, etc., is demonstrated over the years in many so called case laws that will support the actual clear, distinct meaning, causal action in relationship to estate. And so the word estate is a word of great extension and comprehends species, every species of property, real and personal. Estate describes both the corpus and the extent of interest, etc., all together. And so that is important. So when estate is used in some connections, it signifies everything of which riches or fortune may consist, etc. And it goes on, but that should give you a rough basic comprehension of estate. And so in that nature of estate, as we've always told people, always relate it to your status. And so we're going to go to status to show you its relationship to your estate. Because often it is not necessarily taken in consideration until someone points it out to you. And this is why I've always taken the position of doing the work. I don't need a title. We need to do the work. Everything will fix itself. In other words, if you fix the house, the wind will stop coming in. So will the culprits. Get your house in order. Status is the standing, the state, or the condition. Status is the legal relation of the individual to the rest of the community. Status involves the rights, the duties, the capacities, and the incapacities which determine a person to a given class. Status is a legal, personal relationship, not temporary in its nature, nor terminable at the mere will of the parties, with which third persons and the state are concerned. And while the term status implies relation, it is not a mere relation. Why? Because status also means estate. Status means estate because it signifies the condition. It signifies the circumstances in which one stands with regard to his or her property, etc. That is very, very clear. Status and estate are related. And so when you come into the status, this is where identity of pedigree is very important, commonly known on the planet as nativity or nationality, which ties you to a descended estate of people related to an aggregate part of Midgard or Earth, etc. That's the aggregate soil. And now you have what is known as aggregate or territorial jurisdiction matters, which comes into place. And this is where the titles play part in where the sultans or the emirs, etc., or the empresses have jurisdictional authority over an identified territorial jurisdiction with identified officers applied or assigned by the sovereign right of the people, clearly known and publicly known, to deal with jurisdictional powers that are clearly written, clearly known, not hidden, not veiled, not vague, in relationship to any other counterclaim that may be made by any other feudal lords or others, etc., making claim of heirship on lands or estates or hereditaments that have no right vested in them, i.e., which is a knowledge that counters colonial operations of claim, which is what we're suffering from right now. This is back where the work needs to be done. So keep that in mind. So when Noble Drew Ali told the Moors to, if they don't do anything else, declare their nationality, he's actually tying us politically back to our lost estate. But then the knowledge that goes with it, that causes that what you call honorable allegiance, etc., must be in place. That the heirs, who are would be loosely referred to, not always properly, but loosely referred to as the nationals, and just sometimes as the subjects or citizens, etc., would have a known pattern or knowledge, documented knowledge of allegiance to that nation state, etc. All of those principles must be in place. And that is part of the healing. So you must know some of these things that were removed from us to put us in this social political position so that we could be vampirized or exploited by colonial operations under the unum sanctum operations, which is in fact not an opinion. That's what's been going on. That's the mission of the reparations, etc., under the establishment of the Moorish Divine and National Movement to refer to or to imply the obligations that already exist before you were born to be enforced. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to activate the law supreme of the aggregate land that was already in place but has been breached, trespassed against, and ignored. And people are ignoring it because people keep wanting to be they want 5 feathers in their fez, and so I'm the new emir of the territory type thing. Well, it's fine if that's what you need, but I say if this other work is not being done before the title is taken, or even while it's taken, in council with the people, with publications to support it, etc., we're going to continue to have these problems. So I'm not condemning, I'm supporting. But I'm also saying I'm also pragmatic, realistic, and I'm saying the reparation and the healing of our nation has no place for ego, has no place for the desiring of a title, has every place for workers. And I'm a fisherman and a carpenter and a builder, and I use those principles in my everyday affairs.
Aaliyah Bey asked me to ask if you know what the blue kachina is surrounding the sun.
Bettina?
Kachina, the blue kachina. I believe that has to do with the Hopi.
Oh, or what we call the energy, or you would.
They were talking about that as a symbol, I believe, of sign of something.
Or what we sometimes refer to as the nimbus. Or
no,
we call it
the blue kachina. There's like a return of when that appears. It's supposed to signal.
Oh yes, well again, that's the energy that we also call. Some people call it the return of the white buffalo type thing, and we're actually talking about the coming of the new age or the evolution, because humanity is actually going through an evolutionary stage, and some people will call it the Christ degree, or where the activation of the pineal gland. Some will call it the Kundalini. Some will call it the Nirvana. But essentially, some will call the new era of time or the age of Aquarius, etc. All of those references actually the activation of the pineal gland or the Christ degree or the Christ degree. And the fact of the matter is, like all other living operations on the planet, the sun has that effect on also the evolution of man. This is again why over the years we mentioned, particularly in most recent times, people need to recognize that as the firmament of Midgard has gone through the futon belt, you notice that the sun is whiter, less yellow, more white. And so that means you have less constriction of the debris that has made up the futon belt, and so you have actually different energy. But even with that, not unlike the seeds of plant life, etc., there's an activation in the evolution of man spurred by the energies of the planets, etc. And this is where you get Cosmo, or what you call the crescent and the star symbolism, which is also symbolizing the sun, the moon, the stars, and the effect of them, their energies on the planet. And so when you look at that nimbus, or what you call that halo around the sun, and the changes that take place, you would talk about the era of time, or the arriving of humankind on another evolutionary scale. And this is also why it is comprehended that while we're doing a lot of analysis of what you would call moral and ethical construction of government, it is for the exercising of the mind, but we also recognize is so that we'll release some of these things from the old Piscean era that we have adopted, knowing that while we're studying them to comprehend what got us to where we are, a lot of those things we will not be doing in the future. In other words, we're evolving, to keep it simple.
Here's a question, one other question from Abdul Bey TV. Wants to know if it's true that many politicians are locked up in Gitmo by Mr. T.
Well, as we've told people in these last few years, and particularly in these last 4 years, when we reminded people, and some people have taken it wrong, that Donald J. Trump is assigned. And one of the things that people need to know when they're talking about, as an example, the Abraham Lincoln administration, when the members of the Circle Church and Chancery of the Bar Association infiltrated the Congress for the Republic with the intention of overthrowing, which is one of which the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was part of that covert activity, etc., and converted, overthrew the Republic, thus their obligation to treaties and Constitution to enforce the Inquisition operations. And people will just cover it up with the statement saying that they changed the Republic to a corporation. No, that's a lie. They had no authority to do that. The deal of it is the Republic still stood. It's just that the people who are the Republic were being attacked, and many of us lost knowledge that all this foundation of this estate operations here, that we are the rightful heirs. And then we, over the years, have been misdirected by COINTELPRO operatives, which is a later name given to, say, Boule operatives and many of your minions who have been working for Rome, who sent our people on this civil rights march all around the place, Negro citizen BS crap that has actually designed under the 14th constructed amendment that was never properly ratified in order to steal the birthright of the Moors. And under the guise of naturalization, not nationalization, naturalization, from a legal perspective, the Moors lost their nationality. However, I always challenge scholars to prove the existence of a so-called U.S. identity card of citizenship, which never existed. And so there's an implied contract of obligation or service to a de facto corporation political system of body politics of the Bar Association of British Accredited Registry, and thus accepting a debt for national services that were never actually executed, because we cannot be and never were citizens of the U.S. corporation company, but we're in fact under corporal colonial operations right on. And of course, this is where the restoration of the right of estate comes from with the Moorish Divine and National Movement, with the restoration of the lost estate of the Moors. And of course, by people not knowing the political background, they have a tendency to look at the Moorish Divine and National Movement only from a pseudo religious perspective. And this is why there's, in many instances, a lot of schism that exists within the Moorish movement over these decades for people having a lack of knowledge of what the real politics are. And they would take a perspective based on leader guys who take positions of sheiks, grand governors, etc., without consideration of the real obligations of diversity of nationality and the distinguishing of the legitimate platforms of controversy relative to persons and property in relationship to diversity, particularly Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution with the enforcement of all treaties, and Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States with the obligations in place for the enforcement of all treaties, etc., being the supreme law of the land, which has not been taught to the people, and therefore very often their concept of looking at that Constitution has been wrong, not comprehending that the Constitution and the presidency is the obligation of those corporate foreign bodies doing business at Morocco, and limitations of their jurisdictional powers in relationship to both the people of the land and even to their own members, etc., with all treaties in force. This is again why many people, when they're talking about nation states, etc., they will always bring up titles, but they won't bring up the issue of diversity and explain it clearly to people, and also the lawful venue by which those things are executed whenever there's a controversy between persons or property relative to status and estate, etc. That's where you see in the Constitution, and I suggest that many of you who are out there read Article 3, that's the judicial platform for the Republic, and you will see that the lawful courts that were set up under the jurisdiction of the United States is ambassadors, diplomats, and consulars. And when you're dealing with treaty enforcement, logically, that is consular court. And this is again why people who really know this have been offended over the years of me promoting the restoration of the activities of Article 3 courts of diversity of consular venue relative to diversity of nationality to properly address the issues of the Aboriginal people of the land, because that's the established venue. And of course, people who have been benefiting from perpetrating the Bar Association pilfering of our people, logically, politically don't support that, although it's written right there, and try to present the dogmatic position that I made that up, or they say that the people who have been listening to some of the things that I've taught would say, oh, they're Tajites, rather than do the research for themselves and see that you have traitors among your own. And this is back to what Sister was talking about earlier, because this is again why we always try to share information with the people, because the people must clean up their house, and they must shed themselves of these parasites and opportunists among our own who have been pretending to love our people. This is why you'll see many of them that when you get into the details of this information, all of a sudden with them, Noble Drawley is no longer the prophet. And you'll see them making statements like that. Why? Because it exposes them, because they're traitors. And that's not opinion. You do research and you'll see it for yourself. And this is again why we've had difficulty over the years. And of course, people among the nationals of the land who are not aware of the real history get caught in personalities rather than looking at the principled facts and then measuring or vetting the people accordingly. And because many people have not been truthfully and properly teaching the principles of nationality and the relationships between government and nationals and citizens and the different statuses and subjects, etc., and it has not been made clear to them, they get caught in this gray area, and that's what has allowed these opportunists and thieves among our own who have been secretly working for the Bar Association to pilfer our people for hundreds and thousands of notes, etc., under the guise of commercial credit systems, etc., under the guise of rescuing them to their estate, when in fact they are the heirs of the estate. And so they have them buying and selling aspects of their own estate from foreign European courier members of the Bar Association and their helpers among our own who've been pilfering our people and, of course, prolonging the problem. And like the sister says, we're going to have to start shedding these people, and we're going to have to start recognizing that and stop taking things personal and start vetting people according to principle and stop making this stuff complex, because it isn't complex and never was. Just because the Bar Association made a law process complex artificially in order to deny our people due process, and keep in mind, justice delayed is justice denied. And keep in mind, the fundamental principles of supreme law of the land are to be put in place, easily recognized, comprehended, and within the capacity of the average man, woman, and intelligent child to comprehend. And they have made all of this stuff complex. This is why, even again, as Dr. Naila set up up close and personal, as we did the last time, I shared with people Chapter 1 of American law, government law and sovereignty, because also the priesthood and the politicians have been putting a bad spin or a negative spin on people who even mention the word sovereign, because that's divine. That's not given to you by government. Keep that in mind. They don't want you to know that. They think that's some kind of privilege if you sign some commercial agreement and make some financial statement to receive credit from the Bar Association through the Jesuit order of the Federal Reserve, to get some credit notes from them, and then be able to do some transacted business rather than tying you back to your actual lost estate, which they've been living on at your expense as belligerent fofers under the guise of trustee. This is again why they don't teach trust law. So their motive is not honorable. But of course they know that people that don't know these fundamentals get caught up in, oh, I follow this person. You don't follow anybody. What you do, you study what people do and let it become your own, and do some cross-reference and research. Then you get together with other honorable people, getting the worms out from under you, the parasites from around you, the narcissistic title holders from around you that are more interested in guiding their hands into your pockets than they are in liberating the people. And this is again why over the years, because I already know people will go through developmental stages. And I've always reminded people, some of the things you do today, you will not be doing tomorrow. But I also know that our people need to go through some of these experiences. And at the same time, I also know and I was aware that the time would come that the nations of the earth would stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, and you would have the feedback loop, which I've been telling people for years. And so now you got all these trade embargoes. And so now people are starting to feel it, aren't they? So you're not going to have to keep on arguing with these people to make them comprehend what Noble Drew did when he established the divine national movement, because it has a purpose. And now you can also see those who have been countering it, because it's becoming more and more obvious, because it's coming to the surface, and you can discern for yourself. My concern and my energy is involved in bringing up certain issues that help people make discernment, so that people by their own will and intent can help fix this thing, because it's your birthright. It's not somebody's good idea that you're a club member to. And it's so important for that to be clear to you. And this is also for people over the years that keep trying to assign me to things that my mother didn't assign me to. My mother assigned me to what I'm doing. I'm a fisherman. I'm a carpenter. I'm a builder. That's what I do. And for those who have those skills, if that's what their mother made them for, go ahead and do it. More power to you.
I'm trying to get to the there are a lot of questions in here pertaining to how one should nationalize. I mean, because there's probably as many responses.
Make that very clear to me.
How? I mean, there are literally questions about how to nationalize. And so.
Oh, yeah. Now, and this is, give me that treaty book again, please. That's very important. Because this is very important. And this is what people need to understand or comprehend. And again, I will remind you how this stuff is often redundant. Now, as far as the Naturalization Act, and now this goes with the citizenship, And as you all know, that they're having problems here, not only at North America, but around the world with territorial jurisdictional issues being breached and people in the political realm being forced to address it. And they'll call it foreign innocent immigrants coming across the Mexican border or the Canadian border, etc. And so now the issues of territorial jurisdiction is being addressed reluctantly and creating a bunch of problems. But the masses have not been told that the issue that are being addressed with the so-called immigrant problem and families being separated, etc., is territorial jurisdiction. And for them to actually have legitimate claim of argument or counter argument in the international venue of what is called international law, now you're talking back to what is known as the common law or nature's law. Now you got to name the mothers. So now the issue of nationality is being brought up, even though they're not defining it to the people, because in order to have argument, they got to identify themselves. So how is these foreign Europeans here, and I'm not supporting one side or another, I want you to look at, examine this, because this is for your teaching. This is for your instruction. This is for your comprehension. When they're talking about the different people coming from South American islands and South American nations up to North America under the United States, remember, the United States is a private corporation. The political jurisdiction is America, and they are Americans. Most of these people that they're calling immigrants. Now they're caught because they're still trying to promote that the United States Corporation Company is the country. As a matter of fact, they'll often say America, which is also a false paradigm without explanation, because that's the continent. You see the problem that they're having right now? So the things that they're having right now, problems that they're having right now, Noble Drawley just over 100 years ago to the Moors of the land. And now these things are being placed before you in your experience for your learning. So now in relationship to even the issue of the Moors here and their nationality, we're going to go here in the treaty book. And that printing is direct from the congressional records, etc. And I left the printing in its original form rather than typing it over. And as I said before, because I already know that we have operatives among our own. A lot of people were sent around that like the sister said earlier, that you trusted. I already know, because a lot of people, everybody has something to offer. However, I already knew in due time they would expose themselves. A lot of them mad at me now, don't want to speak to me. I don't care. Well, I already knew many of them that were agents from the beginning. But we're in a mess. You got to learn to work with people. And you got to learn that, like the sister said earlier, we're going to have to shed some of these people. But without knowledge, you won't know how to vet them. So here we go. I want you to look in this. And so that is page 460. And this is a print off, not the actual pages in the book. This is for your reference, for your research. Citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. Statement. There are, however, numerous treaties and conventions between the various Christian countries and the Moorish Empire, by means of which citizenship in this country is defined. But as I understand from the above acknowledged instruction, that's plural, instructions, that it is not the desire of the department to call for a report upon such lines, which means they don't want to expose, they don't want to make this, public controversy. I will therefore confine these remarks to general conditions existing, which may possibly be of some use in connection with the information desired. Number one, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries. So these are universal principles. Keep this in mind. With the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure as Moorish subjects. That means you got to prove that you ain't Moorish. If you're here, North America, which is really Morocco, under the occupation of the United States Corporation Company, because you can see right here, citizenship of the United States, and you can see right here, there it is, Morocco. It's not hidden, and it's not unknown that these people are Moors. Number 2 and 3, Moorish subjects lost their nationality only by becoming naturalized in or protected by another country having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. It was established by the Convention of Madrid, concluded July the 3rd, 1880, etc. And so you see why they've been promoting the 14th Amendment Negro Acts and telling our people that they're Negroes instead of Moors, which would make them stock property. And that's what we've been suffering from. Now you understand why Noble Drawley say declare your nationality, because you got to clear your status up to even make claim to your estate. That's documented. And how many of your so-called Moorish leader guys avoid what I just said? That's documented. They'll tell people Taji guy made that stuff up. Lying their keisters off. That's why a lot of people are upset with me. And it's exposing a lot of people who've been around me for quite some time. They thought I didn't see them. I thought I see them. But I'm a warrior. I'm in the field. I'm getting my hands dirty. I don't need a fez. I don't need my turban. I don't need the jewelry. I'm down to earth, Taji guy with the cheap sneaks, getting work done. And those of you who need title, go ahead and have fun. I want to get the work done. I want to see my children and my children's children liberated. I don't need no crown.
Here's a question from Lamont Moy. It says, Emperor stated Dey, D-E-Y, were Caucasians. Who were the Deys?
Caucasians are Moors. Duh, duh, duh. This goes back to the linguistic form. Caucasus Israel, under the rulership of Aunt, who was known as Aunt Hagar, who ruled the Yucatan, who ruled the Moabite nation in southwest of Mexum, known as the Yucatan. And her grave right now is in Mecca on the other side. How come they won't say that? Because the name that was given to the hybrid came from Yaqub Kushidus, Israel, etc. That's where the name come from that was given to the hybrid for sake of the hybrid experiments. Because there is no such thing as Caucasian in the concept that has been adopted in the modern world. You need to know your Moorish history. So when you're making these statements, the assumption on the connotative level of animal husbandry must not be established as the genetic and political reality as it has been promoted, because it's a false paradigm.
Did I just hear you say that the Caucasians were Moors?
Because who you think Yaqub was? He's a scientist.
But
his middle name was given to them.
But was that not an experiment that created a hybridization of Moors?
Now
and
you
other
got it. Yes,
beings?
Now they're called amalgamated Moors, also referred to in the Bible as the Great Amalgamation.
Would those also be the lepers?
Yeah, exactly. That was put behind the lesion, behind the rock. So that's why the rocks or the mountains were called the Caucasus Mountains. It was named after the great experimenter with the 12 women scientists, who you rarely hear talking about. You only hear usually of Yaqub. And instead of saying Yaqub, they'll say Jacob ladder.
They also have,
People need to really know. You need to know your Moorish history.
they also say that the women scientists that carried the experiment, they try to give them an extraterrestrial origin. They talk about Inky and Enlil.
Don't we all know? Let's be real. Don't we all know that all of us are not necessarily from this particular planet?
Oh yeah.
And that we have peopled other aspects of the planet, and in this particular hemisphere of the galaxy of this solar system, the humanoid figure, though taking variable forms, is common to this particular solar system. That's a fact. Now, the deal of it is the hybriding. This is where you go into, when, for those of you who have Oxford dictionaries. Now, here's your Oxfords. Let me see. See your Oxford dictionaries. You go look up hybrid. And hybrid, and they will tell you, and this is again why they don't have certain dictionaries in our communities, and this is due to the Sigmund Freud mind control operations in the education system. They will tell you in reference to the Albions, because remember, where we place them in what you call England, or land of Angles, what you call England, etc., is that when we ruled, that area was called Albion after we put the hybrids there behind the rock. This is where you get the Caucasian designation given to them from the scientists, etc. So that was given to them. This is also where you have the heterogeneous exposure, even in Oxford Dictionary. And they will say to you, and I think it's in entry around entry 8 or something like this. This is for you scholars to do your research. And they will say, we Englishmen are but heterogeneous hybrids at best. You will not find that in your regular dictionaries because of the animal husbandry dispensation, etc., by Sigmund Freud, and adopted by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in 1902. With those, now they're not going to go into that logically, because you will recognize that that you have what you will call the hybrid rebellion. And this is demonstrated to you in movie form, like the Nemesis of the Wicked Witch of the West, and then the good Witch of the East, and they're in battle representing matriarchy. Then you have Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz representing matriarch, and then you have the Yellow Brick Road, which represents the zodiac constitution principle of the Canaanite Moabite nation cosmology, etc. And then you have the Anthropopithecus Pongidae with wings, representing the hybriding of off-world, etc., i.e. you would call them the flying monkeys. And then you have the Wizard of Oz, which represents the dogma system of the representation of the Godhead principle, the corruption of humanity with the corruption of religion. All of that's in the Wizard of Oz. And it's also in many other movie forms that they tell you your history. And then you'll see, for those of you who have been into movies, look at the keep in mind, Moor in French is Moreau. So keep that in mind. That in French is a branch of Latin, Moorish Latin. And then you're going back to Iberia. And this is why a lot of people who really don't know the history of the takeover of Iberia in Europe will say, oh, well, Moor is French. French is African, you dummies. You know, our people, and the scholars have done this to our people. And the real deal of it is, that's why even in more recent years, because people who really don't know this history of Central America and the Yucatan, you know, keep thinking that Caucasian is really the pale-skinned species of the human stock in its hybrid form. Well, yes, that's a name given to them, but they're actually given the experimental term of albine or albion. This is where you get the term albino. And when you do the research and you all go into your old dictionaries, the land that you called England is known as Albion. Why? Because that's where we took the albinos. This is where it's talked in the Septuaginta in the Bible as the people with the lepers. They also, now you understand in Ireland when they talk about the leprechaun and the gold, etc., and the little green men, etc., and the golden rainbow and the pot of gold at the end. And then you talk about, as a matter of fact, in your King Alfred, for them, this is named after King Alfred in the Ireland area. And you'll talk about Tag Day, or when they ran the Moors, they say the snakes out of Ireland. That's you. They were killing off the Moors, the Dubs, and the Picts, etc. So in many ways, they're actually exposing the history. But if you don't know how we got to where we are, you see these things, and if no one makes you reconnected to it, you dismiss it as if it belongs to the Paleolith, when actually they genocided you out in Iberia, or what you call Europa, and now they're doing it to you in North America, which is silent weapons for quiet wars. They're continuing their Inquisition operations. That's why I make the distinction, and particularly as of late, hybrid Europeans, to make the distinction between the hybrids, which is a mixture of Pongidae and human species, and with some off-world. This is why they're hybrids. And this is also why they're warring on you. You need to understand, because they're not the people of the earth. They're hybrids. Now, that's not to be used negatively. That's the truth of the human walk. And if you are not ready to handle that, many people in secret societies know this information, but they only speak of it in attic chambers around the world. And so because they've hidden this history from the people keep looking at these as an original people. They're not original. They are hybrids. And the two particular heterogeneous species is the Pongidae and the humanoid. And that makes what you know as the Albion, or the Caucasian tag, from the experiments coming from Patagonia, that is now called Argentina. And so when you do the research and you start looking at the problems that a man named Hitler had with trying to eliminate some of those problems that were inculcated in Germany, that also was breaking them, etc., you're going to find that some of the history that was told to you about Hitler is incorrect. Now, you're getting in an uncomfortable area with a lot of people. And so some of these things are never talked about openly because you will be sanctioned. Because one of the first things that the Circle Church Circle Church and Curia members must do is pledge all economic operations of the United States Corporation Company of the Jesuit order to what they call Yisrael. Now tell me that's not a fact. So when you start learning who's really been running the banks, who's been running the schools, who runs the United States, who runs the judicial system and the POW camps, everybody wants to get persimmon mouth. It's the hybrid Europeans. Sometimes referred to as Khazarian, sometimes referred to as the Cabal, sometimes referred to as the Satanists, etc. But that's what's been happening to you and the world to this very day. And it's important for you to comprehend that so that you can start healing the Moorish Nation. Because without the knowledge of how you got to this position, you will be fighting the wrong fight. That's the fact, y'all.
Okay. So DD, it says there are groups claiming to have AB bloodline of Jesus / Abraham Lincoln's Armenian lineage, saying they want sovereignty restored. However, without mention of Moors, I've been saying that. What does that mean for us?
Now,
I've been asking
remember
you that.
what we said to people for years. I said, what? Remember, I said this for years before this stuff came out with this cover up with this biological warfare, which they admit to right here, right? And I said, some people mistake when I say that Trump is a sign. I said, but keep this in mind: they're battling over our estate. Yeshua, because it ain't no Jesus. Jesus is a password, and that's why symbolically for the knowledge, Jesus is used connotatively as meaning justice. When the knowledge comes out, or when the truth comes out, the people, it will make the people free. So what you call Jesus is Yeshua ben Yosef, and so they were Canaanite Moabite blood. This is again why they'll give you signals even in all your secret societies. They'll say, who was Ruth the Moabitess? And they'll say, Ruth the Moabitess was Jesus' great-great-grandmother. So who is the Moabites? Moabites are what? A branch of the old Canaanites from the land of Canaan, which is now called Israel. Isn't that interesting? Right next to Hikupta, that you know is Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Oh, so the real Sabians are Moors, aren't they? So it seems like somebody who's been claiming to be JEW are not who they claim to be. And they've been pretending to be you and killing you off. So we need to heal the nation, don't we? Without a knowledge of what happened to you, you will be distracted by people who are placed among you to distract you into not things that are not, that's not that they're not important, but they're not where your cure is. I just remind you that, so you need discernment. And I'm not saying don't do certain things. I say do everything that you do with knowledge and discernment. And what we try to do here at the House of Reawakening Minds is share with you a lot of knowledge that we know others have, but they stay away from, because it will kill their little clubs and it will take their hands out your pockets. And it'll get you to stop sacrificing the next generation with a bunch of beliefs and then start directing them to a knowledge. And with knowledge, the truth comes. And with the truth comes, so does the liberation and the restoration of the estate. So know ye the truth, and the truth will make you free. I'm more interested in that than a title, but I'm not condemning titles.
Ava asked, how is all this going to matter if they're fixing to shut down the grids and shove people into camps?
Of course, that's their plan. Of course, that's their plan. Now, this is your plan. The time has come, apparently, that the issue of nation states are coming up every day, and borderlines of territorial jurisdiction are coming up, and they're going to be forced to address what they haven't been addressing. So meanwhile, with the King Alfred plan, the genocide and biological warfare operations is already in place, isn't it? Isn't it? But the knowledge of the people will what? Start causing the people to say, I think I ought to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and confess my own and honor my mothers and fathers so I can have right of inheritance. Oh, I think some of these things that people have been saying every year have a relationship, but not the way they thought it was when they were in these club organizations under the name of religion and dogma. It was never placed to them in the real world. Now we are all facing it. This is why I said a couple of years ago, people talk all kind of trash about their spirituality. Well, now you're going to have to prove you God. I ain't arguing with you. Do your thing. I'm about to work. And we all have shadow work to do. So let's work on our lower self, and Mother Nature will open up what you need. Because it's proving that the people won't buy or sell without that mark or license from the beast. Oh, so the beast is the number of a man, isn't it? Oh, you thought it was some Baphomet signal somewhere. No, he got 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head, and he's been doing a lot of dirty stuff to you, and you thought he was your government, thought he was your banker, thought he was your lawyer. They're Roman courier members and Satanists of the Dark Order, and they've been ruling this planet, and the cleanup is on its way, because the earth is your house. Get your house in order. Repair the nation. We need healing. And I'm going to tell you bluntly, because this stuff is coming out as we speak, not just later, because you're experiencing it now. A lot of people are going to need consolation and solace systems, because a lot of people aren't going to be able to handle necessarily, they're not going to be willing to handle the ugly that they're going to be exposed to. And before it gets better, it's going to get worse. And this is my response to the sister and to the statement. I support your statement in caring and everything, but I'm also realistic that in war, there's casualties. All the people, this is not an issue, although it could be an issue of saving the world, because whosoever will, let them come. Whosoever will, let them hear. And whoever so will, let them serve Rome, and Rome is going to devour them. That's the intent. It doesn't have to happen, but only by your will. And so what are we doing? We're doing our little part of trying to help in this great missionary work of uplifting fallen humanity. And often by dealing with subject matters and information that many people over the decades have deliberately avoided. They're more interested in titles, and they're more interested in being liked by the people. And they're more interested in having their hands into people's pockets. Oh, and I'm not denying that it takes finance to do things. I know that. However, that's not where I'm coming from. So I don't need a title. That's again for those who keep thinking I need a title. I don't need a title. I'm Taji guy with the cheap sneaks. Get over it.
So to reiterate that earlier question about whether you accepted that, but the answer was no.
Exactly. Because the deal of it, see, this is what must be comprehended too. And I'm saying this with all due respect and love and caring for all of our people. People have been groomed under animal husbandry to continue to do this practice of what they call the sacrificial lamb. And so the concept of human sacrifice is still with us, even though it's been hidden. And so people's dynamics of thinking in their so-called spiritual development is thinking that they need to sacrifice Jesus type thing, not recognizing that that's Rome's method of operations. And that's not Jesus's philosophy. Jesus was a target. Yeshua was a target for sacrifice. That's not his philosophy. And so they keep associating the sacrifice principle with Yeshua when it should be associated with Rome, who are bloodlusters. They come as the makers or bringers of peace when actually they're the peace breakers. They're showing it openly now because they don't have the time to keep on BSing you. They're doing it openly now. They're calling it mandate.
Mandate.
And mandate is not law. I think y'all better go in your law dictionaries and look up mandate.
Why don't you read it? What does it say in there?
Again?
What does it say in Black's Law about a mandate?
Oh, let's go to it. And you know, this is again, Dr. Naila, why they don't teach our people, you know, fundamental laws. Mm-hmm. So mandate is a command, an order, or a direction, written or oral, which court is authorized to give and a person is bound to obey. Mandate is a judicial command or precept proceeding from a court of court or judicial officer directing the proper officer to enforce a judgment, sentence, or decree. A mandate is a precept or an order issued upon the decision of an appeal or a writ of error, directing action to be taken or disposition to be made of case by inferior court. And in some of the state jurisdictions, the name mandate has been substituted for mandamus. Mandate is a substitute for mandamus. Is why you see me all over years talking about quo warranto, a writ, an agreement of jurisdiction, and an agreement of mandamus. So as a formal title of that writ, etc. A bailment of property in regard to which the bailee engages to do some act without regard. So it's clearly that it is totally a judicial act from an inferior court not having a constitutional foundation whatsoever. It's a decree made by an incompetent inferior court, logically not Article 3 and logically not constitutional, i.e. mandate.
Okay, so Richard Amonrod basis, can you talk about constructing a lien against corrupted officials?
And this is where, now let's look, this is point. So for those who comprehend those principles, look up surety bond, write that down, surety bond. The same way that you would issue a writ or a claim against any other insurance bond, etc., is in itself a lis pendens in its nature against someone who trespasses against your right or your estate. Now we're back to the word estate, aren't we? And your status, isn't it? That's called the lien. And guess what happened when a couple of them are lodged against persons who claim to have authority that don't? The insurance companies will no longer back their bond because it will kill the commissioner's office. This is why they don't teach the people that anybody in political position that claim any authority by law must carry a surety or equity bond. And what that lien is a claim against their bond. That's why you do both quo warrantos and agreements of jurisdictions, and you do research on anyone that claims authority because they have an equity bond, make a claim on it. That's a lien.
Can you explain what?
And now you're going to go ahead.
Explain quo warranto.
Quo warranto is what is known as a DOAO, or the authorized legitimate delegation of authority by which an office or an officer holds office, with a time of enactment and a termination time, and is always by law variably constructed under Constitution law, by no other methodology. And that's what is known as, when the question comes before any person who claims authority, are you, he or she, an Article 3 judicial constitutional officer? Just that simple. And if they don't answer it, you already know they're a fraud, and they ain't going to answer it because they're actually foreign corporate operatives. That's why they don't teach people to do quo warrantos. And this is back to even when Drew Ali said enforce the Constitution. The more you understand that, the more you will understand when you enforce the Constitution, you're enforcing treaties, which supersede that Constitution. And it's the supreme law of the land. And the judges of every state must abide thereby and must support it. And that includes the judicial officers, the executive, etc., legislative, etc. And any laws of any state to the contrary has no standing whatsoever. That's why it says notwithstanding. So read Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States, Read Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution for the United States. Read Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States, and read Act 6 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws of the Moorish Divine and National Movement via the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and the Moorish Science Temple of America, and see that they obviously harmonize. And that's as a counter to many of the naysayers that have been infiltrated among us.
Question is, can you explain apostille number 1?
Apostille is generally still you're dealing with jurisdiction. So and this is back to my argument with many people who keep calling the de facto operatives government. They're seeking for them to give them what you call, not unlike say a fee simple type claim or an allodial claim. They have no capacity to exercise it because they're not the people of the land and they're not the legitimate government. The rights of sovereign divine right already belong to the people. This is where the Declaration of Nationality comes from, and this is where you organize, etc., in your judicial operations as justices, executing your right of execution of a state and reversion of a state. And of course, this is where your councils will come in. But those councils must be clear, and they're councils, not so much councils.
Here's a question from El Nucleus Bay. Should Moors be concerned about chakras and crystals?
Isn't that part of African culture? Aren't you going back to your culture on multiple levels? Isn't that your relationship to nature and nature's law? Distinguished from the artificialities that have been imposed upon the people? Just a reminder. So I'm not saying pro or con. I'm saying answer your own questions. It becomes obvious.
Okay, let me see. I thought I asked you this question. Didn't I ask you about the locked up politicians? I don't know whether you answered it.
You know, we didn't go into that. That's what's taking place right now with what you... Now, remember, we were talking earlier, and I think we got distracted with, the multiple levels of the questions and the necessity to actually talk some of the paradigms of the operations. During the Lincoln administration, when they did what is known as the Sine Die action of covert subversion and misprision, which would include the assassination of Lincoln, which is simply a part of this construction. And they, under de facto operations, enforced the doctrine of discovery and the unum sanctum operations under the Circle Church and Chancery. And this is where those operatives of the Bar Association are actually running all the courts, etc. And so when you're looking at, you understand also that during the Lincoln administration, he set up a small cadre of generals, etc., within the military to protect the Constitution and treaty operations, or the legitimate operations of the United States Republic. And that operation is called Q. And I'm sure that many of you heard this word Q being thrown around in the recent years and thinking that it's a new thing. Well, that started during the Lincoln administration. That Q operation was assigned to Donald J. Trump by the part of the military that has maintained loyalty to the Republic order of legitimate business at Morocco, etc., under the United States, or States United, the Republic, distinguished from the U.S. democracy platform of the dark priesthood of the Circle Church and Chancery. And so Donald Trump was assigned to restore as a figurehead, because there's really a lot of other people behind him, the order of the republic. And logically, by virtue of that, the treaty enforcement and everything else to the true heirs of the land comes into play. And I remind Moors of that. It's not so much the Constitution as they see on the surface, it's what that really implies. And your mind needs to go back to the issue that all treaties and agreements entered into before the adoption of that Constitution shall be binding upon the United States, etc., as well as under the Confederation. And all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Once you start seeing that in Article 6, you start recognizing the implications. And of course, you understand why some of your so-called black civilized or civil rights leaders and none of your politicians will make emphasis on that, nor will they make emphasis what I read to you earlier from the treaty book, etc. And why constitutional principles are always presented to our people from the perspective that it doesn't apply to us, when in fact it's a key tie to the enforcement of the treaties. And it's the supreme law of the land.
But with regard to these politicians, I'm
They're being arrested.
Yeah, that was the
under
question.
misprision and treason. Now look at these terms and write these down.
But why are we still seeing them?
Yeah, but I'm just CGI and other things, in clones and doubles.
All right,
let's look at mandates distinguished from supreme law. Let's look at Constitution and treaty obligations enforcements. And these things you write down because we're not going to go into all these things. Let's look at the motu proprio presented by Pope Francis in 2013. Let's look at world government corporations that went bankrupt in these late years, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And you'll see that the United States is prominently listed that they're bankrupt. Look at the meeting that the Pope had with so-called religious leaders from all persuasions, etc., Islam, so-called Judaism, and Christianity. And you notice how all of them were kissing his finger. And you want to understand the dogma situation. And their promise to stop exercising the doctrine of discovery, which has still been enforced, that our people been falsely told was racism and prejudice to cover it up. And this is why people that keep on promoting the race paradigm are frauds, not because I say so, because when you know the real history, you already know they're in place to divert your attention from the reality of the doctrine of discovery and unum sanctum operations. And therefore, our people have been continuously being injured. And of course, this is back to the issue of my concern with people who have this knowledge. Get out in the field, get your hands dirty, take off them royal clothes, and start liberating your people. Like Noble Drew Ali said, with all these sheiks and sheikesses and grand sheiks, he says, the hedges and the highways, which means take it to the people. Excuse me. Go ahead, Dr. Nayyar.
Well, so I need you to weigh in on this because there's a comment here. T is not a Moor, B either. So, wait a minute, let me finish where you said T is not a Moor, B either. So I'm thinking that it is like double teaming against the Moors. Look at what's happening. And then the other follow-up is that this individual says, my reading as well, Taj confuses on this. So the fact that I'm just saying,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm putting them back both there because you know what they're saying.
When
you talk about them being being assigned, they're saying, and with good reason, that neither of them are Moors.
Legitimate statement. Go ahead.
And we've even said that.
Statement.
We've even said that with regard to where do we figure in
legitimate statement
to the fight that is over our estate.
Legitimate statement.
Okay, so weigh in.
And legitimate statement and legitimate critique.
Okay.
Now you got to look at what you call political chess. You make a move, Rome makes a move. All right? What is it that Trump's assigned to do? To restore the republic. This is on their part with the military, because the nations won't trade with them anymore, and they won't buy U.S. Treasury bonds anymore, which are the foundation for their economic system that made the Jesuit Order's Federal Reserve what is known as the reserve currency for the world, a status which has been lost. However, you're in flux. When I say you're in flux, because they have been controlling under feudal law your estate. This is back to you comprehending that you've been under occupation. Therefore, you have interest. You have interest because they're occupying your land. They're occupying your estate. They've stolen your gold and silver. They're operating on your land in breach of treaty, etc. By default, you have interest. However, as we said in opening, they've been doing what? Pretending to be Americans, haven't they? And they've been battling over your estate for power over your estate. Meanwhile, you're supposed to have been standing up and starting to take your places among the affairs of men, not forgetting that they're de facto, which I've always said they're de facto. I understand and comprehend exactly what I've been saying. What you're looking at is chess. And guess what? By default, some of our people have been the pawns, and I'm saying by fact, I'm telling many of you, step off the board. Observe them battling over your estate and take your places among the affairs of men.
So basically, even though they're battling over
your estate, it affects you.
So what is our position as having not taken our place in the affairs of men? What is the move now in this chess game for us? Because there's just two sides, and we're the third side.
Exactly. So now you're supposed to have been studying, haven't you? Isn't that what Drawley set up? Can't say that he didn't, because he certainly did.
Well, yeah, he did.
And then he said, come all ye Asiatics of North America, and hear the truth about your nationality and your birthrights. You're not Negro, black, colored, or Ethiopian. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. Now, look at Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws. He says the chairman and moderator is put in power to make law and to enforce law if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And it is known by the members of the Moorish Temple of Science, i.e. Moorish Science Temple of America. Is that not what's written? So meanwhile, while our people are in a learning stage, those occupiers are fighting over your estate, hoping that you don't wake up. But when it all boils down, when they restore the republic, guess what? They're restoring the obligations of the treaty. I suggest that you read civil orders issued to Barack H. Obama by Pope Francis. And then you'll understand why I've been saying what I'm saying. Trump is assigned. I told you that. It's a chess move. And our people are behind the curve. The heirs of the estate are behind the curve. All this time while they're battling, you should be studying and doing your shadow work. And nature will take care of the rest.
I would think, though, in this battle that's going on, if Mr. T's side is...
See, don't look at that. They're two sides of the same coin.
No, but I know that. If he and whoever is with him should prevail, that we have a better opportunity or chance of restoring
that's the chess move.
Our estate, because of and the reason why I say that is because of some of what was done while he was still in office that many Moors were not aware of, that he's actually he had made executive orders. He had sent information. I have copies of letters that he sent telling Moors to come get their stuff.
Exactly.
That they were entitled to it.
Exactly.
That I saw them. I have copies.
Public, for our people, what can you lose? What do you have to lose? You keep voting for the Ku Klux Klan, i.e. the Democratic Party, which means the cabal, and it doesn't mean that the rhinos of the Republican Party are any better.
Right, because you got them on from both sides.
This is why they've all been countering him. That's not defending Trump, it's understanding the chess move. He was put in place to restore the Republic. And I suggest that you all read the civil orders from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama. You can pull it up on your phones right now, and that will be your answer. I wasn't unaware of what I was saying, and I wasn't unaware that people would take it wrong. I didn't call them that they were Moore's direct heirs. However, we have interest in their affairs, and they're battling over your lost estate. Pay attention. And be prepared to take your places of restoration of your state. That's why over the last 10 years or so, I've been telling people a reversion of a state, because it's promoting a concept of thinking, so that you're doing your studies in the area that of competence that our people, as these things collapse, because they are collapsing, for our people to restore competently a right of claim of their estate, and not be distracted or diverted by people among our own who are parasitic in their character, which his sister was talking about earlier, that we got to cleanse from among us, who are really secret operatives working secretly with the Bar Association, making these things complex when they're not complex whatsoever. It's just our people need to purge themselves of false thinking and false paradigms. But it doesn't mean that they're not supposed to look at things. I'm not saying that. No. I'm saying because everything is a chess move. And even when you look at things that Drawley did earlier, you'll see them falling in place right now. It's called fifth-dimensional chess.
Here's a question. Can parents request the surety bonds of teachers, faculty when they are found not to be doing their jobs?
Repeat that again.
Can parents request the surety bonds of teachers, faculty when they are found not to be doing their jobs?
Of course. Have our people been suing them, going against their surety bonds? Have they been doing it?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't.
So now, isn't this back to the principles that we were talking earlier, that our people need to know how things are structured, how they work, so intelligently they themselves can restore their right of estate by doing what? Making claims against those who trespass. Write this word down too. Trespass against their estate that they didn't even know that they had. Back to the birthright issue, isn't it? And so my appeal is to people, is to us, to start doing things intelligently, more intelligently, and that the fact of our people having a comprehension of what's going on itself will bring the unity. That our people aren't going to come in unity just because it's a good idea and just because we need it. You cannot take an ignorance and liberty do not harmonize together. You know how they say when they make up these artificial figures in history, like Harriet Tubman and others, give our people illusionary works about liberty and stuff like that, to actually divert our people from recognizing that they're really the heirs of the land, and make them think they're running around the land from Europeans who are the Americans type concept, which is totally fraud. And then once they understand this is their estate, their whole paradigm will change, their frame of mind will change, their frame of reference will change, and their actions in the process will change. All of these are chess moves. They're doing chess moves to try to keep themselves in power, still pretending that they're government. And what you'll understand when you go into this is why we also tell people to read House Joint Resolution 192, because you'll find out that all the offices of the United States have been dissolved. So all these people claiming these offices are fronting. This is why I keep reminding people that make sure that you comprehend what de facto means when we're saying it to you. But because our people are behind the eight ball, which means they have not been studying, and people who should have been teaching them been playing leader guy games with them rather than telling them the truth, and then they keep going to these de facto agencies seeking remedies that they're not going to get. And then giving them data to be used against you.
Here's a question from Sheik Bey. Why hasn't anything publicly changed yet 8 years later since the letter from Pope Francis to Obama?
A lot has changed.
Is that all on Trump?
Really, a lot has changed. Trump, keep in mind, Trump is a sign. He's a symbol. If you listen to Trump, his diction in relationship to the corruption, right? In truth, it's average. Yet the activities are more complex. So a lot of the policies of the transfer of misprision operatives to Gitmo, etc., is a more sophisticated operation than what you see on the surface with Trump. Trump is a figurehead. I said that before, and I'm saying now. He was assigned. The presidency for the United States is dissolved.
Okay. Can you briefly explain the gold tassels around the U.S. maritime banner flag?
You already know that law of the seas, admiralty law, piracy, booty, and prize, which is what's been taking place, and the people have been the booty and prize. And this consciousness is to get you in your own consciousness out of that jurisdiction. Stop consenting. How do you stop consenting? By enforcing the Constitution, like Drew Ali said. In the process, you're enforcing the treaties, and you're enforcing the proper jurisdiction of what you call diversity, i.e., all treaties in force, etc. And this is back to lesson book 14 and 14A1 that we've been promoting since 92 area.
Okay, here's my understanding is that the laws being followed in the U.S. are based upon natural law. I know nationality is important, but how is nationality in alignment with natural law?
Because it's nature's law. Nature's God, nature's law that you see noted in the unanimous Declaration of Independence, which is adopted from Fatwa or Muslim law, which Obama mentioned when he went to Egypt. See, it's not that these things haven't been said. It's apparent that people aren't emphasizing it. Are we clear?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that not to defend anybody's position. I'm arguing that a lot of these things have been exposed to the people, and people who should be emphasizing it are not emphasizing it. Same with the rights of indigenous people. Even when you deal with Act 1, Part 6, relative to them stealing people's children. And they have no lawful right to do that, but yet the people aren't going after their bonds, are they? They're going to the corporate court venues of human trafficking, trying to get due process and getting frustrated. Is this not the conversation we've had with family members in recent times, Dr. Nayel, that you're aware of?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at the offspring, you're looking at, from a principle of admiralty, you're looking at property. Of properties and persons, isn't it? Well, haven't we been saying it for years?
Yep.
And I'm not trying to say that we're right and everybody's wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if I present a position, I present it on established fact and research. And then I encourage people to do the same so it becomes their own. Don't look at following what I say. Don't look at it from that perspective. Because I don't promote that paradigm. I promote the liberation, that it becomes your own. I promote that if we're going to be in unity and harmony, that they just follow the leader guy paradigm of the Piscean age is over. It's sort of like Drew Ali said. He says, man, go to the altar of Allah and place your hand in Allah's hand yourself because the priesthood is dead type thing. You understand? He's Drew Ali was all about liberation, and people, always try to twist it back into this, follow leader guy. Drew Ali always said, he said, some of your grand governors have followers. Some of your grand sheiks have followers. Some of your sheikesses have followers. But I, your prophet, have no followers. People got to pay attention to things that, because he gave signals, but I'm not going to argue it. I'm just going to say, make it your own. And choose to act on it or choose not to. The point is, take responsibility for your destiny. Because the issues of cure have been placed before you. And caveats for what you did not know, keys were placed before you to lead you to them, with the instructions that you study and make it your own. I.e., every man, every woman, every child must confess their own. Stop looking for someone else to confess for you. And then look up the word confess too. And you're going to find out it means more than you think it does.
Here's a question. 2 questions. Well, I'll do this one first. From Christian Gogan. Why does the Pope kiss the feet of, it says, black Moor ritualistically to commemorate the creation of their people?
Because you already know, they all know who is the real fathers and mothers of civilization. This is why even after they teach the BS in the public forum, they go down in their chambers and bow down to the Moabitess Madonna. And then the dirty ones will call it Black Madonna, which is no damn such thing.
Okay.
See, they do that. See, if you really study the dark priesthood and a lot of the demonism that they do, and a lot of Satanists that they practice, Satanism that they practice, you'll notice that in different methods, whether they do it by signs or symbols, or whether they do it by some allegorical story, etc., they will literally tell the people what they're going to do. Or they'll tell them the truth even if it's coded. Mm-hmm. But that's because they have knowledge that the laws of nature does not recognize person or station, and that all things living, all things being in existence are subject to those immutable divine laws, whether you're taking a positive or negative position. Therefore, for protection, or what you call karmic reduced response, this is why they focus on deception and fraud in order to get us to agree to fraud and commit violations, and then they, like a jackal, comes and devours the corruption that we agree to, etc. This is why people who really comprehend this thing, even though it's kind of rough on us, will say that people are slaves by consent. But then that must be examined to comprehend it, so that people, don't play victim all the time.
This question, okay.
Because we've been trained to play victim, and that mentality is also designed for us to give up our power and think that we are powerless against this stuff, when that's not true.
Here's a question from I'm stuck. It's not letting me go over there. And that's something. Stop. Okay. Sadiq Hog L says, "You know all this, brother Taj Tarik Bey. Why aren't you?"
No.
Let me finish. You know all this, brother Taj Tarik Bey. Why aren't you teaching this in the Moorish Science Temple of America?
You go to the Moorish Science Temple of America, that is what you call an outreach arm. And when I'm in the temple, like they say in Asbury Park, as an example, or even in the temple that was set up here in Delaware Republic Territory, I taught these things. But I also, from experience, have recognized that in some of the temples, because of the infiltration, this information would not be allowed. This has much to do with the history of why I founded the Round Table in 1982, and also why I'm here at the House of Reawakening Mind, where I'm not censored. And with that as a note, I would suggest they do the research and read the letter from Prophet Novadrales himself, referring to the infiltration and then trying to take over the movement and trying to disqualify him. It's documented. And also, for people to pretend that the movement was not infiltrated is dishonest. because you already know that many of them, and you'll have a lot of people that over the years have come in movement, because as you already know, Dr. Naila, I've already always by practice of the roundtable, by protocol, sent people to the temple who were not there, had not gone to the temples. And you know a few people from your experience of people who's come to the House of Reawakening Minds that I've sent them to the temple, and they had that experience for themselves. As soon as they started sharing some of this information in secret or in private conversation, they would admit that they were right and would shut them down.
Right. But you know that all temples are not like that.
I didn't say all temples.
I know that. I mean, you and I have had this discussion.
Now, here we go again.
No, we're not having.
Not for you. I'm talking about for people in general who make those kind of statements without research.
Right. You and I have had, I'm going to publicly say this, we've had major discussions with regard to temple.
In our evolution in studies.
Right. And I personally told you and others that I would never,
your experience.
No, I would never join a temple because of what I'd seen. However,
from experience, but then you have some that are enforcing the law. Then Jwali said, the time is going to come. He says, the time is going to come when more is going to come into the movement with their eyes wide open and will enforce my law. Why would he say that? Except the caveat is that with the recognition that those who were in seats at the present were not enforcing the law.
Right.
Isn't that quite obvious?
Mm-hmm.
When you do the research into the FBI papers, FBI documents, infiltration into the Moorish movement, and also in the congressional records, when you do the research into the history of American religions, you'll see a lot of organizations that have been claiming nation of this and nation of that were breakoffs from the Moorish movement due to infiltration, but that's not known openly to the public, is it?
No.
But it's documented, isn't it? So when you find these things out for yourself, it's another frame of mind than someone just telling you these things, isn't it? When you start walking the walk yourself, isn't it?
Right.
Then you start going to some Moorish Science Temple of America, and then you see them acknowledge the Moorish Holy Temple of Science operations, because Noble Drew Ali set up a civic organization, didn't he?
Yep.
Give me the literature book, and I'll read that to you for some people who don't know.
What literature book?
The literature book.
But for the record, I have joined the temple.
Now,
so there are. Right.
Here's the literature book issued in the Moorish Science Temple of America, and I want you all to pay attention to this. And this is also addressing the last statement or question that was presented to you that we were answering, right?
Yes.
And I want you to pay attention, because this will answer much for you. Moorish leaders' historical message to America. And I'm going to read and it'll also give you reference points for research. So be patient. It's not too long. It's only a couple pages. However, it's important for anybody who has questions about the Moorish movement. Very important. In connection, this is Moorish leaders' historical message to America. Noble Drew Ali. In connection with the aims, objects, rules, and regulations of the Moorish Science Temple of America, I deem it proper to submit to you a brief statement of our organization covering its inception, rise, and progress, and of the Mohammedan religion, which I hope will be satisfactory to you and be the means of causing you at all times to adhere to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice in your relation with mankind in general. I further most anxiously hope this brief statement will help you to more clearly see the duty and wisdom of all times upholding those fundamental principles which are desired for our civilization, for our posterity, and as obedience to law, respect and loyalty to government, tolerance, and unity. We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization under the laws of the state of Illinois on November 29th of 1926. The name Moorish Science Temple was changed to the Moorish Temple of Science was changed to the Moorish Science Temple of America, May 1928, in accordance with the legal requirements of the Secretary of State, etc., of Illinois, pardon me. The object of our organization is to help in the great program of uplifting fallen humanity, and teach those things necessary to make our members better citizens. Now, that's just a few paragraphs of about 4 or 5 pages. And right now, many of you know, which was said earlier with the sister when she says, Taj Tarik Bey, why are you not teaching these things in the Moorish Science Temple of America?
That was a brother that asked us.
A brother, etc. And you will find that many of the governors, i.e. of the Moorish Science Temple of America, have been promoting for years that this is no civic organization, that it is a religious organization only, talking about that religious affidavit. And therefore, those civic activities and enforcement of Constitution, which is civics, was not allowed in the teaching forums accordingly. That's an established fact. It's not a condemnation, and it's not a support, etc. It is just a fact of information for those who have wondered why I founded the Roundtable in 1982 and why I became a Mayor of the Order of the Great Seal with a registration in the Library of Congress, etc. And that's a fact. And I've been operative for years, etc. And I've been known for that around the world. But you don't see me going promoting that title, etc. I just do the work. And then by virtue of that, authorized to go to the hedges and the highways to help make our people aware, and by order of the Great Seal of the ancient Canaanite Moabite nation, by right of law and right of position delegated, have been nationalizing people. And then promoting them go to the temple and also for them to study and not trying to make them followers and club members, which I already know has been detrimental to our people. Other people may take different positions. I'm not arguing with them. They got to do what their mother sent them to do. In the end, we'll see who has the proper chess move. Because the stuff is falling apart now, ain't it?
Moorish said, Miss G, you be starting trouble. Not trouble in my start. I ain't starting no trouble. You got me confused there.
Yeah, so he's gonna start new stuff.
I ain't starting no trouble. I just speak the truth in love. And like
we talk on. It's like this. In order to fix things, we can't be sensitive, and we've got to be honest.
I ask you very.
And we got to be honest with the questions.
I ask you very honest questions. I mean,
and that's honest.
When I joined the temple, I ask you if that affected you, if you had an issue with. I mean, I did what I did because I'm grown and make my own decisions.
And once I heard some of the things they're teaching, I say, go ahead. You need that experience.
Absolutely.
Because it becomes your own.
Right.
And you'll comprehend why they're doing what they're doing and that they're proper.
Right.
And for those who question, we're talking about Temple 43.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not discrediting any other temples. We're just talking about our experience, our walk.
Right.
Because this is a walk of learning.
Absolutely.
And there's some who acknowledge that Noble Drawley taught civics, and there's some that won't. And so you understand some of the schism.
Right.
You know, this is a war. They've been warring on us. And not to admit that would be irresponsible and dishonest, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be?
It would.
You can't help the people by lying to them, can you?
Right. Let me ask you this question that I didn't see this down here. That's because we're at the end. says, please ask Grand Sheik, as far as nationality of Moorish Latins throughout Central America, how do we bridge the seeming language comprehension issue when dealing with nationality?
All right, here we go. Now, for those of you who have available to you, the Circle 7 Quran, give me the Circle 7 Quran.
Mine's all over there.
Is it where?
It's over there. They were in that. See that thing with the lines around? I mean, see the book with the rings? It's in that envelope. All of them are over there. So when I do study, see that thing right there?
Oh, yes.
The envelope,
yes.
They're inside.
Excuse me, just a minute.
I'm sorry. They do a pilot check. I can't figure out where this is to get out of here. You see them in there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're in that envelope.
Now, I want to read from the Circle 7 Quran and give you some sound social political concepts. Now, repeat that question for the people.
Okay. As far as nationality of Moorish Latins throughout Central America, how do we bridge the seeming language comprehension issue when dealing with nationality?
Now, in the political realm, you would call that Tower of Babel, in the splitting of the language.
Babel, or what? Babel. Babel. We call it Babel.
Now, in fact, you would also comprehend the dominion of Africa. This is very important. And this would be chapter 47, Egypt, the capital empire of the dominion of Africa. The inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family were second. Then came the word Ethiopia, which means the demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa. The dividing of the land between the father and the son. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest was his father's dominion of Africa. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa, they were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa across the great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands before the great earthquake which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. The river Nile was dredged and made by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt in order to trade with the surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt in those ancient days for trade, and it extends eastward from the river Nile, westward across the great Atlantic, and it was used for trade and transportation. According to all true and divine records of the human race, there is no Negro, black, or colored race attached to the human family, because all the inhabitants of Africa were and are of the human race, descendants of the ancient Canaanite nation from the holy land of Canaan. What your ancient forefathers were, you are today, without doubt or contradiction. And there is no one who is able to change man from the descendant nature of his forefathers unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator Allah himself. These holy and divine laws are from the Prophet Noble Ali, the founder of the uniting of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And these laws are to be strictly preserved by the members of all the temples of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that they will learn to open their meetings and guide it according to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, And every subordinate temple of the Grand Major Temple is to form under the covenant of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and to create their own laws and customs in conjunction with the laws of the Holy Prophet and the Grand Temple. And I, the Prophet Noble Ali, was sent by the great God Allah to warn all Asiatics of America to repent from their sinful ways before that great and dreadful day that is sure to come. The time has come when every nation must worship under its own vine and fig tree, and every tongue must confess his own. And through sin of disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774, and the words Negro, black, and colored were given to the Asiatics of America who were of Moorish descent because they honored not the principles of their mothers and fathers, and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing. So as you can see, when you're dealing with America, North, Central, and South, you're dealing with the Moroccan Empire. And of course, they will tell you, and this is after the fall of the Red House in the Alhambra in Andalusia, which they refer to as Spain after the military operations known as Ferdinand and Isabella, etc., which are military operations, not so much just people as you've been told, etc. That's when Al-Andalusia was named Spain. And so the Moorish Latin was called Spanish, which does not exist. It's Moorish Latin. And so when you go into Moorish history, you will see, or the Moorish Canaanite history, you'll see the multiple dialects from Ibri, that you call Hebrew, from Urdu, Persic, etc., which you call Persia, etc., Persic, Arabic, Aramaic, etc. All of these are dialectical forms. And before the Germanic tribes of hybrid Europeans took over and started burning books and destroying erudition systems of human development, etc., it was common, and it's common now even with many people of Africa who are less colonized than we are here, to speak 7 or 8 languages as a common format. And as you can see, usually when you come more to the north side, you'll see more of the Moors are less able to dialectically disseminate the different dialectical forms of Moorish Latin, etc. And so there's a concept of that we only speak one language type thing when that's never been true. And so this is again why etymology or the etymon degree is not taught to the people, particularly in the North, because the heartland of the North of North America is where they've been launching the wars against the rest of the world, etc. So it was vital to the hybrid Europeans to suppress fundamental erudition among the Moors of the North. So much of our linguistic Babel suffering comes from that. So it is in our interest to we make those repairs, but know for sure that all of the people, the Tainos, the Borican, etc., Arawak, etc., and the Carib, all the different Caribs, all of these are Moorish Berber tribes. Get over it and start loving one another and start executing your right of estate. Anyway, I want to thank you all for sharing this night with us, etc. And as usual, we try to answer a lot of questions, and we try to be open and understand that and comprehend that we have in dialogue because we're family. We're not trying to be, we're the boss and you're the follower. That's not how this works. And as you study, you bring stuff to the table. And yes, ask those tight questions because they need to be answered because a lot more people need to be questioned on things that they've been doing. Anyway, your continued support of the House of Reawakening Minds is greatly appreciated. We want you to know that. We really do. And you can volunteer to assist us with your technical skills and abilities by calling Dr. G during normal business hours at 302-345-0500. That is 302 345-0500. And you can also support via Cash App at cash.me/$reawaken or PayPal at paypal.me/Niola Gilliam, or send money orders payable to House of Reawakening Minds, and that will be sent to 602 Vandiver Avenue, Wilmington, Delaware, Republic, zip exempt 19802. Thank you for sharing this evening with us, and we hope we help again, because unless our people know what got us in this condition, we can talk all kinds of trash and come together with all kinds of clubisms, but you're not going to heal the nation, and you can't create a new nation. The nation already exists. It's been injured, and it's our duty to help in the great missionary work of uplifting and fallen humanity, and so we need healing, we need support, etc., but do it with love, good intentions, and never with selfish, narcissistic intent, etc. And so you all have a grand evening. And Dr. Niola, will you share anything with us tonight before we close out?
I think I've shared enough.
All right.
I thank everyone again. Just to echo what you said, we thank everyone for their ongoing support. All the phone calls we get on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Having a little problem getting this stuff unstuck. The calls, the emails, and I apologize sometimes when I don't get to answer your emails.
Remember, we're doing multiple things.
Yeah, and it's just a handful doing it, like two hands.
Yeah.
So we just thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for your orders for USB drives, and anything we can do to help, please just reach out to us, email us, text us, and what we can do, we will do, and what we won't, what we can't, we will sure let you know.
We always say, take the position, do your best and leave the rest, because it's everybody's job. Remember, liberty and liberating humanity is everybody's business. And as some people say, freedom is everybody's job. So don't look for no sacrificial lambs. We're going to do this stuff together.
Thank you, Grand Sheik. Good night, y'all.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you.